Revenge with Karen. You want to know what 20 years of my life looks like. It looks like a spaghetti bowl of copper wire, 3,000 gallons of dielectric oil, and a constant, low-frequency hum that vibrates in your molars even when you're sleeping. I'm Janet. I don't have a fancy title that fits on a LinkedIn bio without looking like a scramble of acronyms, but for 2 decades, been the industrial power systems engineer for a Midwestern metals plant that chews up electricity like a starving dog eats ribeyes. I'm the reason the lights don't flicker when the arc furnaces kick on. I'm the reason the main transformer didn't turn into a jagged crater during the ice storm of 18. I'm the quiet spine of this place. The guys on the floor, big, bearded dudes with welding scars and backs that click when they stand up, don't call maintenance when the hum changes pitch. They call me. They know that if Janet is walking slowly with a cup of black coffee, the world is turning. If Janet is running, you better find a concrete wall and pray to whatever God you ignored last Sunday. Speaking of ignoring things, if you're into stories about corporate idiots getting chemically castrated by their own hubris, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button and slap the like. It fuels my caffeine addiction and keeps the stories coming. Seriously, 95% of you are lurking in the shadows like a raccoon in a dumpster. Join the crew. Now, back to the impending disaster. The factory isn't just a building to me, it's a beast. A living, breathing, cranky beast that needs to be fed exactly 13.8 kilovolts, or it throws a tantrum that costs 6 figures a minute. I know its moods. I know that switchgear B gets sticky when the humidity drops below 40%, and I know that the backup generator has a 2-second lag that terrifies the accountants, but is perfectly safe if you manually feather the load distribution. Then there's Eric. Eric is the founder's son. He's 32, wears suits that cost more than my truck, and has a smile that looks like it was calibrated by a marketing team. He took over operations 6 months ago when his dad, old man, finally decided his heart couldn't take the stress and semi-retired to a golf course in Florida where the sand traps are probably imported. Eric doesn't know a volt from a vulture. He thinks efficiency is something you buy in a software package. He walks around the plant with a glossy notebook, frowning at things he doesn't understand, which is basically everything that isn't a vending machine. I saw the writing on the wall, and by wall, I mean the dirty, grease-stained drywall of the control room, about 2 months into his reign. He started bringing in consultants. You know the type, 20-something kids with MBA degrees who look at a blast furnace and ask if we can optimize the thermal output by turning it down. I watched them circle my department like sharks that had never actually seen blood, but read a book about it once. Janet, Eric said to me one morning, standing in the doorway of my control room, didn't come inside. Nobody likes coming inside my office. It's kept at a crisp 60 degrees to keep the servers happy, and it smells like ozone and burnt flux. It's not a space for cologne. We're reviewing the budget. Your department seems heavy. Heavy? I asked, not looking up from the SCADA monitors. The grid was fluctuating. The local utility was having a brownout. I was manually balancing our capacitor banks to keep the voltage sag from tripping the main breakers. It's like trying to land a 747 on an aircraft carrier while someone is throwing rocks at you. Expensive, he clarified. You have 3 assistants. You have an overtime budget that rivals the sales team. And frankly, looking at these charts, everything seems automated. Why are we paying for manual oversight on a system that runs itself? I finally turned my chair around. I took a slow sip of coffee that had been sitting there since 4 a.m. It was cold and tasted like battery acid. Perfect. Eric, I said, using his name without the mister, because I changed his diapers metaphorically when he was interning here at 18. The system runs itself the way a grenade flies itself. It works great until it lands. Those automated systems are 20 years old. Logic controllers are held together by patches I wrote in code that doesn't even exist anymore. You're paying for the fact that when the grid spikes, I know which breaker to sacrifice so the whole plant doesn't go dark. He smirked. That damn pearly white smirk. That sounds like job security jargon to me, Janet. We're modernizing. We need lean operations. Synergy. I hate the word synergy. It usually means someone is about to lose their health insurance. Cut my budget, you cut your safety net, I said flatly. The smelters. You know what happens if the smelters lose power for more than 15 minutes? We have backups, he waved a hand dismissively. The backups take 12 minutes to synchronize without manual override because the phase converters are drifting. That leaves you a 3-minute window. If you miss it, the metal in those pots turns into a 10-ton brick. You have to jackhammer it out. It takes months. It costs millions. Being dramatic, he sighed, checking his Rolex. Just justify your existence on paper, Janet. I need a report by Friday. I wrote the report. It was 40 pages of technical density that detailed every catastrophe I'd averted in the last fiscal quarter alone. I listed the thermal runaway I stopped in May, the harmonic distortion event in June that would have fried every computer in the admin building if I hadn't isolated the ground loop. I laid it out like an autopsy of a disaster that never happened. But I knew he wouldn't read it. Eric didn't read. He skimmed. He looked for bold numbers and bottom lines. And my bottom line was a salary that reflected 20 years of being the only person who knew where the bodies were buried, or rather, where the high-voltage cables were spliced. The atmosphere in the plant shifted over the next few weeks. My guys, the maintenance crew, the shift supervisors, they sensed it, stopped making eye contact. It's a specific kind of silence that falls over a factory when layoffs are looming. It's heavier than the machinery. Even the turbines seemed to whine a little louder, like they were nervous. I kept doing my job. I kept the beast fed. I smoothed out the spikes. I drank my coffee, but I also started cleaning out my hard drive. Not the company files, I'm a professional mostly, but my personal notes. The cheat sheets, little text files where I'd written down the idiosyncrasies of the system. Turbine 3 vibrates at 60 Hc, dampened to 58 Hc. Feeder 4 runs hot. Ignore the alarm until it hits 90 C. The main breaker handle needs to be jiggled to the left or it won't engage. Tiny, crucial details. The knowledge that lives in the fingertips, not the manual. I deleted them one by one. If I was heavy, I figured I should shed some weight. Yesterday morning, the summon came. A calendar invite titled Restructuring Discussion. No agenda attached. Just Eric, me, and the HR director, a woman named Linda who always looked like she was smelling something mildly unpleasant. I put on my best flannel shirt, clean, pressed, still smelled like fabric softener, and my cleanest pair of work boots. I walked through the factory floor on my way to the admin block. I touched the cold steel of a support pillar as I passed. A goodbye, Pat. The guys nodded at me. Morning, Janet. How's she running, Janet? She's running hot, boys, I said. Keep an eye on the gauges. They didn't know, but I knew. I could feel the electricity in the air, static and sharp. The storm wasn't outside this time. It was sitting in a glass-walled conference room, wearing a 3-piece suit and thinking he was a god because he knew how to read a spreadsheet. I walked into that office with the calm of a woman who has handled 480-volt arcs without flinching. I sat down. Eric didn't look up from his papers. Linda gave me a tight, pained smile. So I said, crossing my arms over my chest, let's talk about synergy. The air conditioner in the room hummed. It was a cheap, rattling sound. I knew exactly which fan belt was loose. I could have fixed it in 5 minutes with a screwdriver and a piece of rubber. As I looked at Eric, finally raising his eyes with that bored, arrogant glaze, I decided the noise was fitting. It was the sound of things falling apart, and I was about to be the one pulling the pin. The conference room wasn't empty. That was the first violation of the unwritten code. You fire someone like me, someone who has been part of the foundation since the concrete was wet, you do it in private. You do it with a handshake and a lie about going in a different direction. Don't do it in front of an audience. But Eric, in his infinite wisdom, had turned this into a spectator sport. Sitting around the long mahogany table were the department heads, sales, logistics, HR, and 3 of those fresh-faced efficiency consultants who looked like they were barely out of puberty. They were tapping away on tablets, probably calculating how much money they'd save on coffee filters if they fired the janitors. When I walked in, the typing stopped. Silence was thick, sticky, and smelled of cheap cologne and fear. Janet, have a seat, Eric said, gesturing to the chair at the far end of the table. He was at the head, naturally, flanked by a projector screen displaying a graph with a red line plummeting like a stone. The title of the slide was Legacy Costs and Operational Drag. I remained standing. I prefer to stand, Eric. My knees lock up if I sit in cheap chairs for too long. A nervous titter ran through the room. Linda from HR looked like she wanted to swallow her own tongue. Eric's smile tightened, the edges cracking just a bit. Suit yourself, he said, tapping a key on his laptop. The slide changed. It was a breakdown of my salary, my benefits, and the overtime costs of my team. It was projected there in 4K resolution for everyone to see. It was a gross violation of privacy, but Eric didn't care about privacy. He cared about dominance. As you can see, Eric began, addressing the room rather than me. The engineering oversight department is bleeding us. We're paying a premium for manual intervention in an age of automation. I've had the consultants run a full audit. Their conclusion: the current grid management can be handled by our existing SCADA software with a simple remote monitoring contract. He looked at me then, eyes gleaming with the triumph of a man who thinks he's just slain a dragon. Really, he's just kicked a sleeping bear. Janet, effective immediately, your position is being eliminated. We're moving to a cloud-based monitoring solution. Cloud-based, I repeated, the words tasting like ash. You're going to run a 40-year-old heavy metals plant from the cloud. What happens when the internet goes down, Eric? What happens when the latency hits 500 milliseconds and the phase synchronization drifts? That's what the redundancy protocols are for. One of the consultants piped up. He had a squeaky voice and a tie that was too wide. The algorithm handles the latency. I laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was a dry, hacking sound that came from the back of my throat, where the cigarette smoke usually lives. The algorithm? Kid, the algorithm doesn't know that the number 4 smelter has a hairline fracture in the induction coil that creates a harmonic feedback loop every time the weather gets cold. Algorithm doesn't know you have to ramp up the voltage slowly on Tuesdays because the utility does a grid switch that causes a transient spike. That sounds like anecdotal evidence. Eric cut in, his voice sharp. We operate on data, Janet, not folklore. Folklore? I took a step toward the table. The logistics manager actually flinched. I've kept this place from burning to the ground 3 times in the last year. You call it folklore, I call it physics. Fire me, you lose the translator. The machinery doesn't speak English, Eric. It speaks voltage, and right now it's screaming. Enough, Eric slammed his hand on the table. It was a theatrical gesture practiced in a mirror. This isn't a debate, it's a notification. You're done? Your access acts are revoked as of now. He checked his watch. Security will escort you out. He threw a packet of papers across the polished wood. It slid and stopped inches from my hand. Standard severance. 2 weeks' pay for every year served, provided you sign the NDA and non-disparagement agreement. I looked at the packet. Then I looked at Eric. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel the crushing weight of unemployment or the panic of a mortgage. I felt a sudden, icy clarity. It was the same feeling I got when a breaker blew, the immediate assessment of damage, the calculation of the fix. Only this time, I wasn't going to fix it. You think I'm expensive? Asked, my voice dropping to a low, steady rumble. Eric, I'm the cheapest insurance policy you ever had. You're trading a firefighter for a smoke detector that's out of batteries. I said, get out. Eric snapped, his face flushing red. You're disrupting the meeting. Don't make me call the guards. I looked around the room. The sales manager was staring at his shoes. Linda was pretending to take notes on a blank pad. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke up. 20 years of keeping their lights on, keeping their paychecks clearing by ensuring the product flowed, and not one of them had the spine to say, hey, maybe don't fire the wizard who keeps the tower standing. Fine, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keycard. It was worn smooth, the edges cracked, the lanyard stained with grease. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a plastic clack that sounded louder than a gunshot in the quiet room. I'll leave, I said. Let me give you one piece of free consulting, since you love consultants so much. I leaned in, placing my callus-hardened hands on the back of the empty chair. The smelters, I said softly. They run on a buffered power supply. The buffer is manually calibrated every 4 hours to account for the grid drift. I did the last calibration at 8 o'clock a.m. It's now 11:30. In exactly 30 minutes, the drift will exceed the safety threshold. Automated system will try to correct it, but it won't be able to because the sensors on pot line 3 are fouled with carbon dust. I was going to clean them after lunch. Eric rolled his eyes. We have maintenance crews, Janet. We're not helpless. The maintenance crews fix broken gears, I said. They don't touch the logic controllers because they're terrified of them. You have 30 minutes, Eric. If that drift isn't corrected, the safety interlocks will trip, power to the pots will cut, and in 10 minutes after that, well, I hope you like modern art because you're going to have 50 tons of solid aluminum statues. Get out. Eric pointed a shaking finger at the door. I straightened up. I adjusted my collar. I looked him dead in the eye. Good luck with the synergy, I said. I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on my back burning. But as I hit the hallway, the cool industrial air hit my face, and I smiled. A real, genuine, terrifying smile. Because I knew something they didn't. I hadn't just left. I had left a ticking clock. And the only person who knew how to stop it was walking toward the parking lot, lighting a Marlboro Red, and getting ready to watch the world burn from a safe distance. The walk from the admin building to the parking lot usually takes 5 minutes. I took 10. I wanted to soak it in. The rhythm of the place, thrum, thrum, thrum of the stamping presses in Building C, the hiss of the steam release valves. It was a symphony I had conducted for 2 decades, and now I was dropping the baton and walking off stage. But I had one stop to make first. My truck was parked around the back, near the auxiliary control shed. It's a small, brick bunker that houses the manual overrides for the substation. Most people don't even know it's there. It looks like a glorified broom closet. Inside, it holds the physical breakers that connect the plant to the municipal grid. I still had my physical keys. I tossed the RFID badge, sure, but the brass key to the shed, that was on my personal ring, nestled between my house key and a bottle opener shaped like a wrench. Eric, in his rush to humiliate me, had forgotten that I held physical access to the heart of the beast. I unlocked the heavy steel door and stepped inside. It was cool and dark, lit only by the green and red LEDs of the breaker panel. The hum here was louder, a physical pressure against the eardrums. This was the raw feed. 138,000 volts stepped down to 13,800. I stood there for a moment, looking at the panel. There was a switch labeled SW4, Auto Sync Override. Here's the thing about the automation Eric loved so much. The software tries to synchronize our internal frequency with the city's grid. The city's grid is dirty, it fluctuates. If the software sees too much variance, it panics and shuts down to protect the equipment. To prevent that, I keep SW4 in the manual position. It tells the computer, shut up, I got this. Ignore the jitter. It forces the system to stay online even when the power isn't perfect. If I flip it to auto, the computer takes over. And without my custom patches, which I had so diligently deleted, the computer is going to see the natural jitter of the grid, assume it's a catastrophic fault, and trip the main breakers. It wouldn't happen instantly. It takes a few minutes for the sampling cycle to complete. Maybe 10, maybe 15, just enough time for me to drive away. I reached out. My hand didn't shake. My pulse didn't race. I felt the cold plastic of the switch. You want automation, Eric? I whispered to the empty room. You got it. Click. I flipped it from manual to auto. The green light flickered once, then turned a solid, unblinking red. The hum of the room didn't change. The lights didn't dim. To an untrained eye, nothing had happened. But I knew. I had just lobotomized the system. I had taken the steady hand off the wheel and engaged a cruise control that didn't know the road ended at a cliff. I stepped out, locked the door, and walked to my car, older than some of the interns, with a rusted wheel well and a bumper sticker that says I am the warranty. I tossed my gear bag in the passenger seat. As I climbed in, I saw Jerry, the head of security, doing his rounds in a golf cart. He waved at me. Jerry's a good guy. He brings donuts on Fridays. He has no idea his boss just fired the only person keeping him safe. Leaving early, Janet? He called out, slowing down. Yeah, Jerry, I shouted over the engine as I cranked it, taking a permanent vacation. Eric's orders. Jerry frowned, confused. Permanent? What about the? He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the humming factory. Not my problem anymore, I said, putting the truck in gear. Hey, Jerry, do me a favor. Yeah, don't ride the elevator in the casting tower for the next hour. Just take the stairs. Why? Trust me. I peeled out of the lot. I didn't speed. I drove the speed limit, obeying every traffic law. Wanted to be miles away when the alarm started. I checked the dashboard clock. 11:42 a.m. The sampling cycle was 5 minutes. The error validation was 3 minutes. The trip sequence was 2 minutes. 11:52 a.m. That was the time of death. I reached for the pack of Marlboros on the dash, shook one out, and lit it with the truck's lighter. I took a drag deep enough to scorch my lungs. It tasted like freedom and ash. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Glanced at it. A text from Sarah, my assistant or former assistant. Janet, where are you? The voltage monitors are acting weird. The frequency is oscillating. Should I call you? I didn't reply. I picked up the phone and held it for a second. Then I powered it off. I turned onto the highway. The factory was a gray smudge in the rearview mirror now, billowing white steam into the blue sky. It looked peaceful. Industrious. You have 10 minutes, I said to the reflection in the mirror. Better start heating up the crowbar, Eric. You're going to need it to pry your career out of the concrete. The radio was playing some classic rock station. Free Fallin' by Tom Petty. I cranked the volume. I wasn't falling. I was soaring. The factory, however, that was a different story. I didn't go home. Home is quiet. Home is where I think too much. Instead, I pulled into O'Malley's, a dive bar about 5 miles up the road that smells like stale beer and regrets. It was noon on a Tuesday, so the clientele consisted of me, a guy who looked like he'd been sleeping in his car since the Reagan administration, and the bartender, a woman named Barb who had a beehive hairdo that defied gravity and physics. "Afternoon, Janet," Barb said, wiping a rag across a spot on the bar that would never be clean. "Bit early for the heavy stuff, ain't it?" "I'm celebrating, Barb," I said, sliding onto a stool. "Give me a Boilermaker, cheap whiskey, and keep 'em coming." "Celebrate what?" "Retirement," I said, involuntary but effective immediately. Barb raised a painted eyebrow but poured the shot. I downed it. The burn was grounding. I placed my phone on the bar, screen down, but even face down I could hear it. BZZZT, BZZZT, BZZZT. It was vibrating against the sticky wood like an angry hornet. I knew exactly what was happening. I didn't need a crystal ball. I needed a stopwatch. 11:55 a.m. Right now, inside the plant, the lights in the main hall would be flickering. Not a strobe, but a subtle dimming, like the building was gasping for air. The heavy motors, the crushers, the conveyors would be changing pitch. The smooth, deep hum would be turning into a jagged, grinding whine as the frequency slipped from a perfect 60 Hz to a jagged 58.5 Hz. On the factory floor, the guys, Mikey, Big Dave, Saul, would be looking up. They'd feel it in their boots. The floor vibration changes when the phase balance is off. Mikey would be yelling at the new kid to check the breakers. 11:58 a.m. In the control room, the alarms would start. First, the yellow warnings. Voltage sag detected. Harmonic distortion high. Sarah would be clicking frantically, trying to find the override command. But the override command was in my head, and I was drinking bourbon. Be looking for the cheat sheet text file on the desktop. File not found. "Where's Janet?" Someone would scream. Maybe Saul. He never trusted the computers. And Eric would be in his office or maybe still in the conference room explaining to the board how much money he just saved them. He wouldn't hear the hum. The admin building is insulated. He wouldn't know until the lights went out. 12 p.m. High noon. The phone on the bar started to dance. Wasn't just vibrating now, it was practically walking across the table. I flipped it over. 15 missed calls. Linda, HR, Eric, do not answer, Sarah, work plan emergency line, and a string of texts that were rapidly devolving from confusion to terror. Sarah, Janet, the main bus is tripping. What is the code for the manual bypass? Sarah, Janet, pick up. Eric, call me immediately. There is a glitch. Eric, the system is crashing. Fix it. Eric, answer the damn phone or I will sue you. I chuckled. Sue me, I muttered, nursing my beer. Good luck serving papers to a ghost. The real horror wasn't the lights going out. That's an inconvenience. The horror was the smelters. The aluminum smelting pots are giant, ceramic-lined bathtubs filled with molten cryolite and dissolved alumina. They run at 960 degrees Celsius. They are kept liquid by the massive electrical current passing through them. It's a delicate, violent balance. When the power cuts, the clock starts. At 5 minutes without power, the magnetic fields collapse. The molten metal stops churning. It settles. At 20 minutes, the crust starts to form on top. Like skin on a pudding, but this pudding is 900 degrees and hard as rock. At 2 hours, the pot freezes solid. A frozen pot is a dead pot. You can't just melt it again. You have to dismantle the entire steel structure, jackhammer out the solidified block of aluminum, which ruins the lining, and rebuild it from scratch. It costs about $300,000 per pot. We have a line of 100 pots. Do the math, Eric. That's $30 million of oops, and that's just the repair cost. The lost production, the missed contracts, the penalties for late delivery to the automotive clients. You're looking at a $100 million hole in the ground. My phone rang again. It was a FaceTime request from Sarah. I stared at it. I could picture her face, pale, terrified, lit by the flashing red of the alarm strobes. I felt a twinge of guilt. Sarah was a good kid. She didn't deserve this. But she also didn't have the leverage to fix it. If I answered now, if I walked her through it, Eric would claim it was a minor glitch. He'd spin it. He'd say, see, we handled it. And I'd still be fired and the plant would still be doomed, just slower. No. Cure the infection, you have to let the fever burn. I let it ring to voicemail. Another round? Barb asked, eyeing the phone. Your boyfriend seems persistent. Ex-boyfriend, I said, toxic relationship. He only calls when he needs something fixed. Amen to that, sister, Barb nodded. She poured the whiskey. Suddenly, the TV in the corner of the bar, which was tuned to the local news channel, cut to a breaking banner. Breaking. Smoke reported at Midwest Metals. Emergency crews responding. It wasn't a fire. It was the emergency venting. When the pots lose power, the anode effect kicks in, releasing perfluorocarbons. It looks like black smoke. The EPA hates that. Well, I said, raising my glass to the TV screen where a helicopter shot showed my life's work venting angry black clouds into the atmosphere. Looks like the synergy just hit the fan. I took a sip. It was smooth, but my hands were trembling just a little, not from fear, from the adrenaline of knowing that I was the only person in the world holding the key to a lock that was rapidly melting shut. My phone finally stopped ringing for about 3 minutes. That was the scariest silence of all. It meant they had stopped panicking and started strategizing. Or more likely, they had gone over Eric's head. At 12:45 p.m., a black town car screeched into the gravel lot of O'Malley's. I watched through the grimy window. Wasn't Eric. Eric drives a Tesla because he thinks it gives him tech cred. This was a Lincoln Continental, old school, heavy steel. The door opened and a man in a golf shirt and khakis stumbled out. He looked like he'd been dragged out of a bunker. It was Marcus, the chairman of the board, the old man's right hand. He didn't look happy. He looked like a man who had just been told his stock portfolio was on fire. He burst into the bar. Sunlight from the open door blinded everyone for a second. He scanned the room, saw me at the bar, and marched over. He smelled of expensive cologne and fierce sweat. Janet, he gasped. He was out of breath. You have to come back. I didn't turn around. I kept watching the news report on the TV. They were interviewing a firefighter now. Get in line, Marcus. I'm enjoying my severance package. Severance? Marcus grabbed my shoulder. I spun on the stool and knocked his hand. Janet, the pot line is cooling. The temperature is down to 850. We have maybe 20 minutes before the crust is too thick to break. Sounds like a management problem, I said coldly. Eric said the automation would handle it. He has a cloud-based solution. Have you tried rebooting the cloud? Eric is a moron, Marcus shouted. Barb stopped wiping the bar. The drunk guy in the corner woke up. We fired him. Okay, he's suspended. Pending investigation. Whatever you want. Just get in the car. You fired him? I raised an eyebrow. Who fired me, Marcus? You signed off on the budget cuts. I saw your signature on the quarterly review. Don't pretend this is all Eric. He pulled the trigger, but you bought the gun. Marcus turned pale. Janet, please, we are talking about the company, the jobs. 500 people work there. If those pots freeze, we close. Everyone goes home. No pensions, no severance, nothing, bankruptcy. He knew which button to push. He knew I didn't give a damn about the shareholders or Eric's inheritance. But the guys, Mikey with his 3 kids, Saul who was 2 years from retirement. I want it in writing, I said. What? I want a contract. Independent consultant, triple my old hourly rate, a 5-year guarantee, and full operational autonomy. No more suits in my control room. No more efficiency experts. I run the grid. Period. Done. Marcus said immediately. I'll write it on a napkin if I have to. Not a napkin, electronic signature. Sent to my personal email, right now. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking so bad he almost dropped it. He dialed the legal department. Draft it, send it. Now, I don't care about the template, just do it. I finished my drink while he screamed at the lawyers. It's sent, he said 2 minutes later. Check your email. I pulled out my phone, turned it on. The screen flooded with notifications, but I ignored them and went to Gmail. There it was, consulting agreement emergency draft. I scanned it. It was sloppy, but the terms were there. $250 an hour, full authority. One more thing, I said, standing up. What? Anything. I want Eric to be the one who meets me at the gate. I want him to escort me to the control room, and I want him to apologize, loudly. Marcus looked pained. Janet, we just removed him from command. Then put him back in for 5 minutes. Those are my terms. Marcus gritted his teeth. Fine, get in the car. The ride back was fast. Marcus drove like a maniac. We blew through 2 red lights. When we pulled up to the main gate, it was chaos. Fire trucks, ambulances, precautionary for heat stroke, and a crowd of confused workers standing in the parking lot. And there he was. Eric looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 hours. His tie was undone, his hair was a mess, and he was holding a hard hat like a shield. I got out of the Lincoln. I walked up to the gate. I didn't open it. I waited. Marcus nudged Eric, "Do it." Eric looked at me. His eyes were full of hate, but his fear was stronger. He walked to the keypad, punched in the code, and the gate slid open. "I'm sorry, Janet," he mumbled. "Can't hear you over the sound of $30 million melting," I said, cupping my ear. "I'm sorry," he screamed, his voice cracking. "I was wrong. You were right. Please fix it." I looked at the workers gathered behind the fence. They were watching. Saul gave me a subtle nod. "All right," I said, tossing my bag over my shoulder. "Let's go save your inheritance, you little shit." I walked past him. I didn't need to run. I knew exactly how much time I had. Physics doesn't change just because people are panicking. I had 12 minutes before the cryolite hardened past the point of return. It was tight, but I've done more with less. The plant was a tomb. That's the first thing you notice when a factory dies. The noise, that comforting, bone-shaking roar, was gone. In its place was a terrifying, hollow silence, broken only by the sharp hiss of pneumatic lines bleeding pressure and the frantic shouting of men who didn't know what to do with their hands. The heat was rising. Without the exhaust fans running at full capacity, the thermal load from the pots was pooling in the ceiling, pushing down like a heavy, suffocating blanket. It smelled of sulfur and hot metal. I walked through the casting floor. The emergency lights bathed everything in a sickly yellow glow. I saw Big Dave standing by number 4 pot line. He was holding a long steel pike, ready to manually break the crust if he had to. It's a suicide mission. If the crust breaks wrong, molten aluminum can explode outward. "Put the pike down, Dave," I called out as I passed. "I'm not letting you melt your face off for minimum wage." Dave saw me. His shoulders dropped about 3 inches. "Janet, thank God. The readout says we're at 840 degrees. It's getting slushy. I know, give me 5 minutes, don't touch anything." I burst into the control room. It looked like the flight deck of a crashing airliner. Sarah was hunched over the main console, tears streaming down her face, furiously typing commands that I knew were being rejected. 2 of the consultants were standing in the corner, looking at their phones, useless as screen doors on a submarine. "Move," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The authority in my voice cracked the air like a whip. Sarah practically fell out of the chair. "Janet, it's locked out. The auto-sync failed, and it tripped the master breaker, and now the logic controller is in a reboot loop because the frequency is unstable." "I know," I said, sliding into the chair. It was still warm. I told it to do that. I looked at the screens. It was a sea of red. Zone A, critical fault zone B. Undervoltage zone C, disconnected. The main bus voltage was 0. The backup generator was running, but it wasn't connecting to the load because the phase angle was off by 120 degrees. The system was trying to protect itself from a mismatch that didn't exist anymore, but the logic was trapped in the error state. "Eric," I said without looking back. He had followed me in, panting like a dog. "Get me a coffee." "Black. 2 sugars, are you serious?" He sputtered. "The plant is dying, and I'm dehydrated. If I pass out, we all lose. Get the coffee." He made a noise of pure frustration but turned and ran to the break room. I smiled, small victories. I cracked my knuckles. Time to work. First, I had to stop the reboot loop. I opened the command terminal. The consultants gasped. "You can't use the command line. That voids the warranty." One of them squeaked. "Kid," I said, typing sudo kill -9 sync daemon, I am the warranty. I killed the synchronization process. The screens flickered and went black for a terrifying second. Then they popped back up. The reboot loop stopped. The system was stable, but dumb. It wasn't trying to think anymore. Good. Now, the hard part. I had to manually synchronize the backup generator to the main bus before I could re-engage the grid connection. It's like trying to jump onto a moving merry-go-round. You miss the timing, you strip the gears. I pulled up the phase monitor. 2 sine waves appeared on the screen. One was the generator, yellow, the other was the dead bus, flatline. "Sarah," I said, "go to the breaker panel in the back. When I say mark, you pump the handle on breaker 3 to prime the spring." "Okay," she said, wiping her eyes. She ran to the back. I watched the frequency. I needed to trick the sensors. I typed in a bypass code when I had memorized 10 years ago. "Override safety limit." The system flashed a warning. "Are you sure? This may cause catastrophic damage." "Yes, I'm sure, you dumb pile of silicon," I muttered, hitting enter. The flat line on the screen jumped. The bus was live, but only with residual capacitance. "Mark," I shouted, clunk clunk. Sarah primed the spring. Hold it, I watched the numbers. 59.8 HC, 59.9 HC. 60.1 HC. Needed 60.0. Dead on. Eric, I yelled. He was standing in the doorway with a spilling cup of coffee. Give me the cup. He handed it to me. I took a sip. It was terrible. Perfect. Okay, I said. Here we go, initiating hard start. I wasn't just flipping a switch. I was conducting an orchestra of high-voltage physics. I had to close the breaker at the exact millisecond the waves aligned. My finger hovered over the enter key. Thump thump. That was my heart. Or that was the cooling fan on the console. 60.0 HC. Click. I hit the key. For a second, nothing happened. The silence stretched out, thin and screaming. Then, from deep in the bowels of the plant came a sound. Ka-chunk. It was the sound of a 2,000-amp breaker closing. It was the loudest, most beautiful sound in the world. The lights in the control room flared bright, then dimmed, then steadied. The hum returned. It started low, a growl in the floorboards, and rose to that familiar, tooth-rattling vibration. The screens turned from red to yellow. Zone A, recovering Zone B. Stabilizing, we have power, Sarah whispered. Oh my God, we have power. Not yet, I said, my eyes glued to the thermal readouts. We have juice. Now we have to see if the patient is brain dead. I looked at the potline temperatures. They were hovering at 830 degrees. The critical freezing point is 820. He had 10 degrees of wiggle room. Full load, I said, typing furiously. I'm dumping everything into the heaters. Ignore the efficiency warnings. We need heat now. I pushed the sliders to 110%. The alarms started screaming again. Overcurrent, transformer temp high. Let it scream, I said. Burn it if you have to. I sat back, watching the temperature graph. It was a flat line. It wasn't going up. Come on, I whispered. Come on, you rusty old bitch. Up, the line on the graph was stubborn. 830 degrees. 829. 830 again. It was teasing us. The electricity was flowing, dumping massive amounts of energy into the pots, but the thermal mass of the aluminum is so huge that it takes time to reverse the cooling. It's like trying to boil a swimming pool with a hairdryer. Why isn't it going up? Eric demanded, looking over my shoulder. He was sweating so much his expensive shirt was translucent. Thermodynamics, Eric, I said without turning. You can't bribe heat. It moves when it wants to. Marcus, the chairman, stepped up. He looked sick. Janet, is it going to hold? Maybe, I said, if the lining didn't crack when it cooled. If it cracked, the molten aluminum will leak out, hit the concrete floor, and explode. We'll know in about 3 minutes. The room went silent again. This was the leverage point. I spun my chair around to face them. While we wait to see if we all blow up, I said, crossing my legs, let's talk about the future. We give you the contract, Marcus said quickly. The money, the authority, it's done. That's the save your ass contract, I said. Now I want the don't ever try this again clause. I pointed at Eric. He goes. Eric bristled. You can't fire me. My name is on the building. Your daddy's name is on the building, I corrected. Her name is on the termination paperwork for the only engineer who knows how this place works. You're a liability, Eric. You're an operational risk. The insurance premiums alone for keeping you around would bankrupt the company. I looked at Marcus. I want him off the operations floor. Permanently. He can keep his title. He can have an office in the admin block where he can play with his spreadsheets and draw pie charts. But he doesn't touch the grid, doesn't touch personnel, and he absolutely does not talk to me. Marcus looked at Eric. Then he looked at the screen where the temperature was still flatlining. Done, Marcus said. Dad told me Eric started. Dad isn't here. Marcus snapped, losing his composure. And if this plant solidifies, Dad will have a heart attack. You're out, Eric, you're VP of Special Projects. Now shut up, I smiled. It was a mean smile, and one more thing. What? Marcus asked, weary. Consultants, the Synergy boys. I gestured to the corner where the 3 kids were huddling. They're gone, today, and their fee comes out of the marketing budget, not engineering. Fine, whatever, just fix the pots. I turned back to the screen. 831 degrees, it's moving, Sarah gasped. It went up a degree. 832, 835. The curve started to bend upward. The current was biting. The heat was soaking back into the metal. Beast was waking up. My phone pinged. It was a text from Saul on the floor. Crust is breaking. We got flow, no leaks. You did it, boss. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands, which had been rock steady, suddenly felt heavy. We're good, I said quietly. Pot line is stable. We're climbing back to operating temp. The room erupted. The consultants high-fived. Idiots. Marcus slumped against the wall, wiping his face with a handkerchief. Sarah hugged me from behind, burying her face in my shoulder. You're a wizard, Janet, she sobbed. I'm not a wizard, Sarah, I said, peeling her off gently. I'm just a mechanic who reads the manual. I stood up. My knees popped. I felt every minute of those 20 years. Eric, I said. He looked at me defeated, small, stripped of his unearned arrogance. My coffee is cold, I said. Get out of my control room. He opened his mouth to say something, looked at Marcus, glared at him, and then turned and walked out. I watched him go. It wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. It was just necessary, like taking out the trash. Marcus, I said, I'm going to finish the stabilization sequence. It'll take about 2 hours, then I'm going home. I expect that contract to be countersigned and in my inbox by morning. It will be, Marcus promised. Janet? Thank you. Don't thank me, I said, turning back to the glowing monitors. Just pay me. By 4:00 p.m., the plant was back to its normal, deafening self. The panic had evaporated, replaced by the steady, rhythmic thump-hiss-clank of production. The smell of ozone and fear had been scrubbed out by the ventilation fans, replaced by the familiar scents of grease, hot metal, and sweat. I left Sarah in charge of the console. She's better than she thinks she is. She just needs confidence, and went for a walk. I needed to see it. Screens are one thing, reality is another. I walked down the main aisle of the pot room. It's a cathedral of industry. The ceiling is 50 feet high, lost in shadows and girders. The pot lines stretch out for a quarter-mile, glowing with a dull, red heat. The men were working. They were skimming the dross, adjusting the anodes, moving with the practiced efficiency of a pit crew. When they saw me, they stopped. It started with Big Dave. He banged his pike against the steel grating of the walkway. Clang, clang, clang. Then Saul joined in with a wrench on a railing. Clang, clang, clang. Then the crane operator honked the horn. It wasn't a cheer, it was better than a cheer. It was the iron salute. It's the noise we make when someone retires or dies, or in my case, rises from the dead. I didn't wave, I just nodded. I walked up to Dave. He was covered in soot, sweat dripping off his nose. How's the crust, Dave? I asked. Soft as butter, boss, he grinned. His teeth looked impossibly white against the grime on his face. We lost maybe 2 pots at the end of the line, but we saved 98. 2 is acceptable, I said. Better than 100. Word is Eric got demoted, Saul said, leaning over the rail. Heard he's in charge of special projects now. What's a special project? Picking out the donuts? Something like that, I said. He learned a lesson today, boys. Don't fire the pilot mid-flight just because you think the plane flies itself. I walked the length of the line. I touched the housings. I listened to the bus bars. They were humming the right tune, a solid B-flat. I felt a profound sense of ownership. Not in the legal sense, I don't own the stock. But I own the soul of this place. I know its ghosts. I know its scars. And today, I reminded everyone else who really holds the keys. I found the divorce Pinterest board equivalent in the break room. Someone had taped a picture of Danny DeVito over Eric's face on the safety poster. The caption read, "So anyway, I started blasting the budget." I laughed, a real laugh this time. The tension in my chest finally uncoiled. I went back to the auxiliary shed, the one where I had flipped the switch. I unlocked it. The red light on SW4 was still glowing. Autosync override. I reached out and flipped it back to manual. The light turned green. The system was safe again, not because of the automation, but because I was back to watch over it. You're welcome, I whispered to the machine. 2 weeks later, the dust has settled. Or rather, the dust has been reorganized into a more profitable pile. My new contract is framed on my wall. It sits right next to a calendar that features exclusively Danny DeVito memes, a gift from the maintenance crew, making 3 times my old salary. I come in at 9 a.m., I leave at 3 p.m., and nobody says a damn word about it. Eric is still here, technically. He has an office in the basement of the admin building. It used to be a storage closet for archives. They gave him a title, Director of Strategic Vision. It means he gets to stare at the wall and envision a strategy where he isn't a laughingstock. I heard he's trying to launch a podcast about resilient leadership. I subscribed just to downvote it. The efficiency consultants were fired the day after the blackout. Turns out, their cloud solution was just a white-labeled interface for a generic industrial controller that wasn't even rated for our voltage. Linda in HR got early retirement. The new HR director is a former union rep who actually knows the workers' names. I'm sitting in the control room right now. It's 2:30 p.m., the grid is stable. The hum is perfect. I'm sipping a coffee that Sarah brought me. She's been promoted to junior systems engineer. I'm teaching her the code. I'm teaching her where the bodies are buried, not so she can replace me, but so she can survive me. People ask if I feel bad about what I did, about the risk, about the 10 minutes where the plant almost died. They say, Janet, wasn't that dangerous? Wasn't that reckless? And I look at them, light a metaphorical cigarette because I can't smoke in here officially, and I say, danger is relative. Driving a car is dangerous if you close your eyes. I didn't close my eyes. I just turned off the headlights to show everyone how dark it gets without me. I open my drawer. Inside, next to my multimeter, is a bottle of sriracha. I don't use it for lunch. I keep it there as a reminder. Sometimes you have to add a little heat to make people realize what they're eating is bland bullshit. The plant is alive. The smelters are cooking. The money is printing. And me? I'm just the janitor. I just clean up the messes the smart people make. I put my feet up on the console. On the screen, the voltage line is flat, steady, unwavering. Just like me. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.
방식이라고 하더라고. 그러니까 뭐 예를 들어 가지고 붕붕빵 재료 있잖아요. 밀가루, 예. 아, 밀가루가 아니라 반죽이랑 뭐 또 뭐 있죠? 반죽 말고, 예. 팥, 뭐 슈크림 그런 거 있잖아. 그런 거 사면은 씨발 잠깐만. 예, 그런 거 사면은요. 그냥 뭐 다른 거는 다 무상으로 임대해 준다는데. 예. 그러니까 내가 처음에는 돈이 좀 드는 줄 알았거든. 돈이 안 든대요. 얼마. 예, 그냥 그 재료값만 든다던데. 나머지는 다 공짜로 해준다던데. 그래서 약간 저런 붕어빵이 무자본 창업이 된대요. 난 몰랐어. 예, 그렇죠. 예, 근데 어쩔 수 없어. 이거는 신고증이 있을 수밖에 없어. 예, 안 그러면은 이제 그 가게를 하나 그거 임대를 해야 돼. 요런 쪼매난 가게 있잖아요. 쪼매난 가게 임대해가지고 앞에다가 포장마차 차려야 돼. 자, 오늘은 과연 포토 아주머니가 있을지. 그러면 점심을 뭐 먹지? 국시 먹을까? 아닌데 아침도 쌀국수 먹었는데 국시는 좀 그런데 그냥 초밥 먹으러 가야겠다. 초밥 세트. 또 시장에 가면은 야물딱지게 또 초밥 하는 데 있거든요. 겁나 싼데 거기 가서 또 초밥 먹읍시다. 오늘 점심은 초밥. 아우, 근데 비 오는 날이 싫은 게, 비 오는 날은 밖이 너무 시끄러워.